Hi there, I am Dan Fromer, and I am obsessed with how and why people spend their time and money. I'm a longtime tech and business journalist. Some of you may remember 18 years ago, we started a little site here in New York called Silicon Alley Insider. I'm now running The New Consumer, exploring these topics, kind of the collision of consumer and tech, e-commerce, consumer brands, and now a lot on AI. I also work with brands on strategy and research. And my research partners for this project, the Consumer Trends Report, is Coefficient Capital, a venture fund based here in New York, investing in consumer brands, many of which you've heard of, Magic Spoon cereal, et cetera, et cetera. We've been publishing what we call the Consumer Trends Report now for 5 years, and it's a data-driven look at the future of the consumer. So we're not really focused on fads. We're looking at 5 to 10 year trends that we can invest in, that we can build companies around, et cetera. And a huge part of our research is what we call the Consumer Trends Survey. We run a proprietary survey 4 times a year, 3 times a year of more than 3,000 US consumers. A lot of the research that I'll present today is from this report. We did our last survey in July, so most of this stuff is only a few weeks old, super fresh and timely. So let's start off with the biggest of big pictures. Do people know what AI is? The answer now is yes. Basically, everybody in the US has heard of AI. And for context, what that means is awareness of AI is now higher than Doritos, TikTok, Viagra, Ozempic, and other things that people click on surveys at a lower rate than they click on awareness of AI. This is news coverage of AI. AI is everywhere. AI is being discussed, especially since the launch of ChatGPT. Coverage has basically doubled and stayed at that higher pace. These are online news articles in the US in the English language. So a lot of talk about AI. Also, you can't stop talking about AI either. These are mentions of AI on corporate earnings calls as tracked by Bloomberg. They have jumped and they have remained at this very high level over the last several quarters. More than half of Gen Z and millennials in our survey say they consider themselves extremely familiar with AI or very familiar with AI. A lot of our work shows generational differences, and apologies again, we have 4 kind of groups of generations here. Gen Z, which are go up into their mid-20s, millennials, which go into kind of early 40s, Gen X, and then boomers here. So if you see stuff like this and you can't see the labels in the front here, these are our generational slides. And you'll see that digital natives, Gen Z and millennials, tend to have a higher familiarity with all digitally native products, and AI is certainly one of them. Gen Z, twice the rate of Gen X at considering themselves sort of experts at AI. This also increases by household income. Wealthier people consider themselves to be more experts at AI at a higher rate than lower earners. Let's talk about AI and the consumer. In terms of awareness of different AI tools, ChatGPT is the winner. Clearly, 74% of Americans have heard of ChatGPT as of this summer. That is up from 37% when we asked the same question 2 years prior. However, you'll notice second place, Meta AI. Not a tool we're talking about a lot today. And similarly, Google Gemini in third place, Microsoft Copilot. The answer here is that distribution is really important. As I like to say, distribution wins championships. So let's not write off Meta AI because a lot of people have it baked into tools they use all the time, and they're not going to go away. By the way, only 7% of people had not heard of any of these tools, which is down from 37% 2 years ago. So a lot of awareness of different AI tools. In our survey, more than 60% of Gen Z said it had used ChatGPT over the past month, so that was basically covering this summer in June. And you'll see a step down to millennials, over half, but lower than Gen Z, and then 33% of Gen X and 16% of what we call Boomers Plus. Also, 2/3 of the students in our survey said they had used ChatGPT over the past month. Something amazing happened this last week. ChatGPT, OpenAI, along with some academic researchers, actually published a 65-page research study about how people are actually using ChatGPT. So before I had some slides based on our survey about how consumers said they were using ChatGPT, but now we actually know, based on over 1 million anonymized messages to ChatGPT, how people are using them. We also know for the first time, really the hockey stick looking growth curve of consumers who are using ChatGPT. It's about to hit 800 million. That is up 3x over the past year. These are ignoring people on corporate enterprise plans. So these are people on consumer plans. And this is an accelerating curve. So this looks good for those who work at OpenAI. How are consumers using ChatGPT? This was some of the more interesting stuff from their report. Also, one other thing from the report is that gender parity has been achieved. In fact, there are now more female-sounding names running OpenAI ChatGPT accounts than male-sounding names, and that is one of those very funny-looking charts where it started off here and then now it's met in the middle. And then as ChatGPT has grown, non-work topics, so more consumer topics that are not about getting work done, now dominate the service. They are now 73% of the messages that were tracked in that study, up from 53% last June, so that's pretty significant change over the span of a year. And then only 27% of messages on ChatGPT in July were work-related, down from 47% last year. And over that span, usage grew 5x again. So as more people are using ChatGPT, they're using it for more use cases than work, and that is where the growth is in the service, which is another reason they just hired Instacart's CEO to basically run the consumer-facing part of ChatGPT. In terms of how people are using the service for what different tasks, they broke it down into these kind of vague categories. Practical guidance and writing are the two largest ones. More than a quarter of messages cover each of those different topics, so more than half covering both of those. Seeking information, aka replacing Google, and then also technical help, multimedia, which is essentially creating graphics, that spiked up when ChatGPT added its new graphics engine, and then some other stuff. Self-expression is down at the bottom. That's like just chit-chat and sort of the flirty stuff that people fear is what is actually going on in ChatGPT. Let's break down some of these categories within practical guidance. So this adds up to the 28 there. Actually, the largest one is tutoring or teaching. So huge academic implications for ChatGPT. We kind of knew this going in, but this is what a lot of consumers are actually using ChatGPT for, is getting lessons or instruction on a specific topic. Also, how-to advice. Of course, at 11:30 on a recent Sunday night, my hot water heater decided to bleed out. So ChatGPT immediately taught me how to turn it off and drain it and everything, and that was really incredible. Would not have known what to do with that. I guess I would have been Googling for a while and filtering spam. But also things like health and fitness. This surprised me. 6% of messages on ChatGPT are about health, fitness, or beauty or self-care. And then creative ideation, which is actually what I use it a lot for, is 4%. Within seeking information, again, this is kind of the replacing Google concept of ChatGPT. Most of that is looking for specific information. A lot of that is, tell me about this topic, or, I ask a lot of food safety questions to ChatGPT. That's my thing. But also shopping, I write and think a lot about shopping. Only 2% of usage right now is related to purchasable products. So I guess the good news for Google is that's where the ads actually make money, and that is still a very small use case for ChatGPT. And then cooking and recipes, only 1%. But if that plugs into commerce, that could be pretty interesting looking forward. This is one of my favorite charts. ChatGPT is, among other things, the homework machine. This is Google search volume for Roblox and ChatGPT. And until very recently, they were almost in kind of parallel worlds here, where you could see exactly when summer vacation and winter vacation happened based on declining search volume for ChatGPT. In red there, an increasing search volume for Roblox. But sorry, Roblox, ChatGPT is now so big that it is recession-proof. It is vacation-proof, and now searches for ChatGPT will live forever as higher than Roblox, I think. Also, another interesting digital native thing, younger consumers tell us they are more comfortable sharing their personal data with AI tools than older consumers. This to give them more personalized recommendations or to have that history. Basically, More than half of Gen Z and millennials consider themselves either very or somewhat comfortable sharing their personal information versus only about 30% of Gen X and older. So definitely, again, more comfort with these tools for younger consumers. Again, the shopping thing is fascinating because if AI starts making the decisions on what we buy, that has implications for everyone, for merchants, for brands. And indeed, there's also a younger consumer thing happening here as well. About a quarter of Gen Z and millennials say that if you were using AI for recipes and meal planning, would you want the AI tool to be able to place the order for you? Essentially, either make the decision on what you're getting or just choose the merchant or whatever that is, and much higher interest among younger consumers and just letting it do that for them than older consumers. So very much where things could be going. And then, of course, the business model of AI is still very much up for debate. Right now, it is a paid subscription service. We asked our panel, what is the most you would be willing to pay for all these AI tools, services, and apps in your life? The majority of Gen X and older would not pay anything. Younger consumers more interested in paying out of pocket for AI tools, but still not much. Kind of in the $0 to $50 range is really where the sweet spot all in is. So less than cable, which may make sense to some of us, but I guess not a lot of younger consumers. And then I am very lucky to have access to a credit card data panel. So this is actual spending on ChatGPT on US consumer credit cards. It is also growing at a nice rate that is accelerating, basically almost tripling year over year, and very much dominant in the market of consumer AI tools. It is now about 2/3 of all consumer spending on AI tools. This kind of bucket of other is number 2 now, and that's 67 other merchants. And 2 other big ones, Anthropic and Midjourney. Midjourney was kind of the first cool and fun graphics engine, and now that's just kind of a feature of OpenAI unless you have very specific needs. And Anthropic, of course, makes Claude, which I prefer for some tasks, but honestly I've really focused my usage on ChatGPT. Just for context, so what does that look like compared to a couple merchants that you've heard of? This navy blue line at the top here is Paramount Plus, kind of a mid-grade streaming service. And then the lighter blue line at the bottom is YouTube Premium. OpenAI has passed YouTube Premium and is now almost as big, essentially, as Paramount Plus, and is growing much faster than both of those. Another one you may have heard of, Spotify. So OpenAI spending on consumer cards is now about 20% of a Spotify. Again, this is all from Consumer Edge, so they're tracking actual spending on consumer credit and debit cards. What about retention? Are people sticking with ChatGPT? This is where the retention curve is kind of in the middle, nowhere near as high as Spotify. Services like Spotify and Netflix and cell phones, there's almost no churn, very low churn. Streaming services have relatively higher churn, so you'll see not quite as bad as Paramount Plus, but certainly not in the Spotify range yet in terms of retaining their subscription after this is a quarter since first purchase. So this would be a year and a half in. Higher is better. Perhaps it'll get there. AI and work, I'll talk a little bit about this. More than 60% of Gen Z and millennials in our survey say they've used AI for work. We did not specify which types of tools, so this is kind of an all-in estimate, but again, lower among Gen X and older consumers. And they like the tools so far. You know, we hear a lot about, oh, they're going to keep getting better, they're going to keep getting better. They're pretty good so far. People are happy with the tools. More than 80% say they've helped people learn new things about work. 3/4 say they've made them more productive. Only 40% here at the bottom say they've made them lazier or have not changed my work at all. So definitely an impact from AI tools on people's jobs. There's the, of course, narrative in media and in culture that AI will steal jobs. Actually, most consumers are not very concerned about this. Only about 15% are concerned about losing their current job or having their job replaced by AI in the next 5 years. That is actually almost twice as high among people who consider themselves AI experts. So the more you know, I guess. But also, basically only 1/3 of people are not at all concerned. So there is some concern that is real. Also fascinating, more consumers expect AI to create career opportunities than to limit them. This ranges from how do you expect AI to impact your career and earning prospects? We start it very positively at the top here, and basically 45% of people expect it to have some sort of positive impact. Another quarter or so say no impact, and then the rest say somewhat negatively. So that's about 19%, either somewhat or very negatively. People who over-index in expecting positive things to happen: men, millennials, urban consumers, higher earners, Latino and Black consumers, full-time workers, and those who already consider themselves AI experts. The people who are more skeptical and expect to have negative impacts are Gen Z, students, and the unemployed. A couple quick things on AI and society then. Always interested in this. Do consumers consider AI art to be art? Generally, more no than yes these days. Actually, the last time we asked this survey question, Gen Z was in the positive camp as well. You'll notice a decline in sentiment around AI from Gen Z in a lot of these questions, but millennials very much still enthusiastic and engaged about AI art, more consider it to be art than no. We ask, how does AI make you feel? And we provide all these different options. And generally, younger consumers are more likely to say it makes them feel excited and less likely to say it makes them feel worried than older consumers, who almost half of them choose worried and only 18% choose excited. But something happened when I was looking at this on a more granular basis, and there's something about Gen Z. Over the last couple of years, they've become, and this has changed since the last time I presented this, they've become more skeptical about AI. Of course, this could just be limitations in our survey panel, but this is almost 1,000 people just in Gen Z alone. They are now equally excited and worried, whereas millennials are much more excited than they are worried, and then older people are much more worried than they are excited. So something has happened with Gen Z and AI that we need to keep an eye on. Not that I'm, working for AI or anything like that, but something to keep in mind. Is AI more or less fair at making important decisions than humans? And this is another one where younger consumers tend to actually think that AI is more fair at a higher rate than older consumers, but kind of the sweet spot is here in this about the same section. And then older consumers more likely to say that AI is less fair than humans. When it comes to things like hiring, lending, or law enforcement, actually having AI make decisions for you is sometimes awesome. It peer pressured me into booking a flight, and indeed, it got more expensive, so I'm glad I did it when it yelled at me to do it. But yes, it perhaps is not quite as neutral as we hope it might. In terms of will life be better or worse over the long run because of AI for the next generation? This is, again, where millennials have this very high expectation that AI is going to make life better, and all other generations are more balanced, especially Gen Z, kind of a retroactive look there, and less likely to say better than millennials, still slightly better than worse. Gen X also slightly better than worse, and then our parents and older essentially saying it is going to make things worse. Sorry. And then we found one area where Democrats and Republicans agree, which is most Americans believe that the government should be more involved than it currently is in regulating AI. This is pretty even across our two major political parties. Thank you so much to all of you. Thanks to my research partners at Coefficient. Thank you to Luna and Consumer Edge. Again, all these slides will be on my website. I'll be sending them out as a newsletter tomorrow. Please join. Here's a very fun discount code for you. And we're about to kick off our next wave of research today. So if you have ideas for me or topics or anything like that, I'm Dan at newconsumer.com. Would love to be useful for all of you. Thank you again, and thanks to Noah.